Will you be my mom? The little girl's voice cut through the marketplace like a blade through silk. Theodora froze, her basket of herbs slipping from trembling fingers. Behind her she felt it, the weight of eyes that could burn kingdoms. The Alpha King had stopped mid-stride, and the entire world held its breath. Before we dive deeper into this story that thousands are calling the most emotional shifter romance of the year, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Seriously, you're going to need it after this story. And hit that subscribe button because part 2 drops tomorrow. And trust me, the twist will shatter you. Now where were we? Yes, the moment everything changed. Theodora's heart hammered against her ribs as she turned slowly, so slowly, to face the child. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5 summers old, with wild dark curls that tangled around a face smudged with dirt and tears. But it was her eyes that stopped Theodora's breath, ancient golden eyes that belonged to royalty, to power, to the bloodline that ruled these lands with an iron fist wrapped in velvet promises. "Sweetheart," Theodora whispered, kneeling despite every instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the shadows where omegas like her belonged. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The child shook her head violently, those golden eyes flooding with tears that tracked clean paths down dirty cheeks. "You smell like sunshine and honey, like the mom in my dreams. Will you be my mom? Please?" And that's when Theodora felt it, the air itself changing, thickening, becoming heavy with a presence so dominant that every omega within 100 yards dropped their gaze to the ground. Every alpha straightened, their wolves recognizing the apex predator before their human minds could process the danger. King Alexandros stepped into view. Theodora had seen him before, of course. Everyone had. His face graced coins and tapestries, portraits in every public building from the capital to the smallest village. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of him up close. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body carved from violence and victory, wrapped in clothes that cost more than her village made in a year. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, framing a face that poets claimed was blessed by the gods themselves, though Theodora thought it looked more like the gods had gotten angry and decided to make something too beautiful, too terrible for mortal eyes. But it was his scent that nearly brought her to her knees. Pine and thunderstorms and something wild, something that called to the omega in her blood despite every wall she'd built around her heart. His eyes, the same impossible gold as the child's, locked onto Theodora with an intensity that felt like being pinned by a spear. "Callista." His voice rolled through the marketplace like distant thunder. "Step away from the omega." The little girl, Callista apparently, wrapped tiny arms around Theodora's neck instead. "No. She's mine. I found her. She's going to be my mom." Theodora's whole body went rigid. She'd heard the rumors, of course. The Alpha King's daughter, born to a woman who died in childbirth 3 years past. A princess who refused every nanny, every caretaker, who screamed through the nights and disrupted the entire palace with her grief and rage. Some said the child was cursed. Others whispered that she could sense lies, that she was searching for something none of them could provide. "Callista." The king's voice dropped lower, a warning that would make grown warriors weep. "Now." "Your Majesty," Theodora forced out, her voice barely above a whisper. Protocol demanded she keep her eyes down, her posture submissive, every part of her screaming omega, harmless, not a threat. But Callista's arms were still around her neck, and something in Theodora's chest was cracking open despite her best efforts to keep it sealed. "I mean no disrespect, but perhaps nothing." He moved closer and gods, he was even larger up close, blotting out the sun. "My daughter has a habit of collecting strays. Last week it was a kitchen cat. The week before a stable boy. You are dismissed with my apologies for the inconvenience." The words should have been a relief. Should have been her escape route. Her path back to her simple life selling herbs and staying invisible. Instead, they felt like a knife between her ribs. Callista's grip tightened. "I'm not collecting. She's different. She smells right. Daddy, please just let her try." "Enough." The single word cracked like a whip, and this time Callista flinched. The little girl's arms loosened, and Theodora felt her pulling away, felt the warmth and desperate hope leaving with her. And that's when Theodora made the mistake that would change everything. She looked up. She met the Alpha King's eyes directly, breaking every rule of submission, every law of their kind. And she said, "She's not collecting anything, Your Majesty. She's grieving. And perhaps," her voice shook but held firm, "perhaps what she needs isn't another servant following orders. Perhaps she needs someone who sees her as more than the crown she'll inherit." The marketplace went deathly silent. Alexandros stared at her, and Theodora watched something flicker across his face. Surprise, anger, and beneath it all, something raw and wounded that made him look almost human. "You dare," he started. "I dare nothing," Theodora interrupted, and gods, what was she doing? But the words kept coming like she was bleeding them. "I simply answer a child who asked me a question. And my answer is..." She looked at Callista, at those golden eyes so full of desperate hope, and felt her heart make a decision her mind screamed against. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll try. If your father permits it." She'd thrown the choice back to him, and they both knew it. Refuse. And he was the monster denying his grieving daughter. Accept, and he was allowing an unknown Omega into his inner circle, into his home, close to his only child. Alexandros's jaw clenched so hard Theodora heard teeth grinding. "You have no idea what you're offering." "Perhaps not," Theodora agreed. "But she asked and I cannot." Her voice cracked. "I cannot ignore a child in pain." Something passed between them then, some recognition of shared damage, shared loss. Theodora saw it in the way his eyes widened fractionally, in the way his rigid posture softened by the barest degree. 3 days, he said finally, his voice rough. "You have 3 days to prove yourself suitable. You'll stay in the palace, supervised at all times. If Callista settles, if she sleeps through even one night, we'll discuss terms. If not..." His eyes hardened. "If not, you'll leave and never speak of this to anyone. Are we clear?" "Crystal, Your Majesty." "Then come." He turned without waiting, clearly expecting obedience. Callista squealed and grabbed Theodora's hand, tugging her forward with surprising strength for such a small child. As they walked through the marketplace toward the palace gates, Theodora caught glimpses of faces, shocked, envious, pitying. Old Berenice, who sold bread in the corner stall, made a warding gesture like Theodora was walking toward her execution. Maybe she was. The palace rose before them like a mountain of marble and gold, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Theodora had never been past the outer gardens, had never dared even dream of entering through those massive doors that now swung open at Alexandros's approach. Inside was cooler, the air perfumed with roses and something else. Power, old magic, the weight of centuries of rule. Servants melted out of their path, all keeping their eyes carefully averted from their king. Theodora noticed how they looked at Callista though, a mix of affection and exasperation, like they loved the child but were exhausted by her. "These will be your quarters." Alexandros pushed open a door to reveal rooms that made Theodora's entire cottage look like a closet. Rich fabrics, carved furniture, windows overlooking gardens so lush they looked painted. "Callista's rooms are through that connecting door. You're to stay with her at all times unless I specifically summon you elsewhere." "I understand." His eyes raked over her, assessing, cataloging. "You'll be provided appropriate clothing. Those," he gestured dismissively at her simple dress, "are unsuitable for palace life." Heat flooded Theodora's cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "These clothes are clean and modest, Your Majesty. They've served me well. I'm not questioning their cleanliness. I'm questioning their practicality. Callista will run you ragged. You'll need proper shoes at minimum, unless you enjoy blisters." Despite herself, despite the tension and fear, Theodora felt her lips twitch. "I hadn't considered that." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. Dinner is at sunset. Someone will fetch you. Until then, I suggest you rest. You'll need it." He left without another word, closing the door behind him with a decisive click. Callista immediately dragged Theodora to the connecting door, flinging it open to reveal a child's paradise. Toys scattered everywhere, books stacked in towers, a bed heaped with so many pillows and blankets it looked like a nest. "This is my room," Callista announced proudly. "Do you like it?" "It's wonderful," Theodora said honestly. "Did you build that?" She pointed to an elaborate castle constructed from blocks. Callista's face fell. "I tried. But I keep knocking it down before it's finished. I get so angry and then She made an exploding gesture with her hands. "And then everyone's mad at me again." Theodora knelt beside the blocks. "May I help?" For the next several hours they built together. Theodora learned that Callista loved purple, hated carrots, could recite every constellation in the night sky, and had memorized the names of every ruler in their kingdom's history. She learned that the little girl's favorite color was actually yellow, like the mom smell you have, and that she had nightmares about darkness swallowing everything she loved. She learned that Callista hadn't slept through a full night since her mother died. "The darkness comes," Callista whispered as the sun began setting outside her windows. "And it takes people away. Took Mama. What if it takes Daddy? What if it takes you?" Theodora's heart clenched. "Oh, sweetheart. The darkness can't take me. I promise." "Everyone promises. Then they leave." There was no good answer to that, no platitude that wouldn't be a lie. So Theodora did the only thing she could. She held out her arms, and when Callista crashed into them, she held on tight. "I can't promise I'll never leave," Theodora said softly. "But I can promise that if I do, it won't be because I want to. And I can promise that right now, in this moment I'm here. Completely here. Is that enough?" Callista's face pressed into her shoulder, voice muffled. "Can you stay? Tonight? When the darkness comes? If your father allows it, yes." As if summoned by his name, a knock sounded at the door. A servant appeared, eyes downcast. "The king requests your presence at dinner, miss. The princess may eat in her rooms if she prefers." Theodora looked at Callista, saw the fear creeping into those golden eyes. "Could we perhaps?" "The king does not make requests he expects to be negotiated," the servant said, not unkindly. "But I'm sure you won't be long." Every instinct screamed at Theodora to refuse, to stay with this frightened child who'd been abandoned too many times already. But she was here on borrowed time, borrowed mercy, and she couldn't afford to antagonize the one person who could send her away with a word. "I'll be back before you can count all your blocks," Theodora promised, pressing a kiss to Callista's forehead. "I swear it." The walk to the dining hall felt like walking to judgment. The servant led her through corridors that grew increasingly grand, each hall more elaborate than the last, until they reached doors carved with scenes of ancient battles, old magic, the very founding of their kingdom. Inside, a table stretched long enough to seat 50, but only one place was set besides the king's, right next to him, close enough that she'd feel the heat of his body, close enough that his scent would drown her. Alexandros stood as she entered, a courtesy that shocked her. Kings didn't stand for omegas. "Theodora." He said her name like he was testing it, tasting it. "Sit." She sat, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Servants appeared with food, roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables prepared in ways she'd never imagined. Her simple meals of stew and porridge had not prepared her for this. "Eat," Alexandros commanded when she hesitated. "You'll need your strength." Theodora took a careful bite of something that melted on her tongue. "Your daughter is remarkable, Your Majesty." "I know. She's brilliant, compassionate, strong beyond her years." "I know. She's also terrified and grieving and—" Theodora set down her fork, turning to look at him directly again, breaking protocol again. "When was the last time you held her? Not commanded her, not corrected her, not arranged for someone else to manage her. When did you last just hold your daughter?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You overstep, Alexandros said, his voice deadly quiet. I speak truth, and you gave me 3 days to help her. I cannot do that if I'm too afraid to be honest. Most people are afraid of me for good reason. I'm sure. You're powerful, dominant, capable of crushing me with a thought. Theodora met his eyes steadily. But Callista isn't afraid of you. She's afraid for you. She's terrified the darkness will take you too, that she'll lose everyone she loves. And part of why she can't sleep is because if she sleeps, she's not watching, not guarding, not keeping the people she loves safe. Alexandros had gone very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. But his eyes, God's, his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like tears. Her mother died in my arms, he said finally, voice rough as gravel. She hemorrhaged and nothing we did could stop it. Elena begged me to take care of our daughter, to not let grief consume me, to not let Callista grow up in shadow. And I failed. Every day I look at that child and see Elena's eyes, Elena's smile, and His voice cracked. I cannot bear it. I cannot hold her without remembering what I lost. What she lost. Theodora's anger softened into something gentler, sadder. So you both grieve alone, separated by the very love that should unite you. I'm protecting her. You're abandoning her, Theodora said softly. Just like everyone else has. Just like I will if you send me away. She'll learn that love means loss, that closeness means pain, that asking for what she needs results in rejection. And what would you have me do? He turned to her fully now, and the raw pain in his face made him look younger, almost vulnerable. How do I hold her when it feels like my chest is being ripped open? How do I comfort her when I cannot comfort myself? You do it anyway, Theodora said simply. You do it because she needs you more than you need to protect yourself from pain. You do it because she's 5 years old and terrified, and the only thing worse than grief is grief experienced alone. They stared at each other, Omega and Alpha King, separated by everything except this shared understanding of loss, of love that hurt more than hate ever could. Who did you lose? Alexandros asked quietly. Theodora looked away. Everyone. A sickness swept through my village when I was 7. My parents, my siblings, my entire pack. I survived, but only because an old healer found me and took me in. She died last year. So yes, Your Majesty, I understand what it means to wake screaming, to fear the darkness, to believe that loving anyone means watching them disappear. Yet you offered to try anyway. To attach yourself to another child you could lose. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is living but not being alive, surviving but not thriving, having a heartbeat but no heart. Alexandros reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away, to refuse. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're either very brave or very foolish, he murmured. Perhaps both. His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. 3 days, Theodora. Show me how to fix what I've broken. Show me how to be what she needs. I can't fix anything, Theodora said. But perhaps together we can start healing. A scream shattered the moment. Callista. Theodora was moving before conscious thought, running through corridors, following the sound of terror. Behind her, she heard Alexandros following, his longer legs eating up the distance. They burst into Callista's rooms to find the little girl thrashing in her bed, tangled in sheets, sobbing words that made no sense. The darkness, it's taking her, it's taking Mama, no, no, no. Theodora didn't hesitate. She climbed into the bed and pulled Callista into her arms, wrapping herself around the terrified child. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. You're safe. The darkness can't have you. Mama. Your mama loved you so much, Theodora whispered, rocking gently. So much that her love is still here, still keeping you safe. Can you feel it? In the warmth of your blankets, in the softness of your pillows, in every beautiful thing in this room. Your mama's love didn't leave with her. Stayed. It's always here. Callista's sobs began to quiet, her breathing starting to even out. Promise. I promise. Theodora looked up to find Alexandros standing in the doorway, his face a mask of devastation and wonder. She held out one hand to him, an invitation, a bridge across the chasm of grief he'd built around himself. For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, like a man approaching something precious and fragile, he crossed to the bed. He sat on the edge, close enough that Theodora could feel the heat of him, could smell that devastating scent of pine and storms. "Daddy!" Callista's voice was small, uncertain. "I'm here, little star." His voice broke on the endearment. "I'm right here. You don't have to be sad," Callista whispered. "Mama wouldn't want you to be sad." "I know." Alexandros reached out with shaking hands and gathered his daughter into his arms, pulling her against his chest. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I've been so far away. I'm sorry I let my grief become more important than your need for your father." Theodora moved to give them space, but Callista grabbed her hand. "Don't go. Both of you stay." So they did. They sat together on that too-large bed in a child's room filled with broken toys and unfinished castles, an Alpha King and an Omega healer and a little girl who'd brought them together through sheer desperate need. Theodora told stories about the stars, about brave heroes and clever heroines, about love that conquered death not through fighting but through remembering, through honoring, through continuing to live in ways that would make the lost proud. Callista's eyes grew heavy, her breathing slow and deep. But each time she started to drift off, she'd jerk awake, panic flashing across her face. "What if I wake up and you're gone?" she whispered. Alexandros looked at Theodora over his daughter's head, something raw and questioning in his eyes. She nodded. "We'll be here," Alexandros promised. "Both of us. All night if you need us." "Really? Really?" This time, when Callista's eyes closed, they stayed closed. Her breathing deepened, evened out, became the peaceful rhythm of true sleep. Neither adult moved, afraid to break the spell, to wake this child who hadn't rested properly in 3 years. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The moon rose outside the windows, painting everything in silver light. "I haven't heard her sleep that quietly since Elena died," Alexandros whispered finally. "How did you do that?" "I didn't do anything. You did. She needed to know you were here, that you weren't lost to grief, that she still had you. And you. She needed you too." He shifted slightly, careful not to wake Callista. "I've tried 17 different caregivers. Nannies, tutors, even a priestess who claimed she could ease traumatic dreams. All of them left within weeks. She drove them away with tantrums, with screaming, with such rage that grown adults couldn't handle her. Because none of them saw her," Theodora said. "They saw the princess, the problem, the child who needed to be fixed. You didn't drive them away, Callista. They were never really there to begin with." Golden eyes met hers in the moonlight. "And you? Will you leave when she drives you away? 'Cause she will try. She'll test you, push every boundary, attempt to make you prove that you're just like all the others. Then I'll prove I'm not." "Why?" The question was raw, genuine. "You don't know us. You owe us nothing. This could ruin your life, tie you to a royal household with all its complications and dangers. Why would you risk it?" Theodora looked down at Callista, at the peaceful face finally free of fear. "Because I know what it's like to survive when you wanted to die. I know what it's like to be so alone that even breathing feels like too much effort. And I know that if someone had reached out to me, had seen me, had proven that I was worth staying for, it might have saved me years of pain. You said everyone you loved died. Yet you're willing to love again." "I didn't say I was willing. I said I couldn't ignore a child in pain. There's a difference." Alexandros studied her, his gaze intense enough that she felt it like a physical touch. "You're protecting yourself. Building walls even as you scale mine. Aren't you doing the same?" A rough laugh escaped him. "Touché." He was quiet for a moment then. "What if I asked you to stay? Not for 3 days. Permanently. As I don't know what to call it. Not a nanny. Not a servant. Something more." Theodora's heart stuttered. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you looked at my daughter and saw a person, not a problem. I know you risked everything to answer her honestly. I know you challenged me, an alpha king, without flinching because you put her needs above your own safety. He paused. And I know that for the first time in 3 years, my daughter is sleeping peacefully. That's enough. Your court would never accept an unknown Omega in such a position. They'd say I was manipulating you, using Callista to gain power. Let them say it. Let them question and whisper and scheme. I stopped caring about their opinions the day I watched my mate die and realized all their power, all their influence, all their grand words couldn't save the one person who mattered. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. You're still angry. I'm furious. At the gods, at fate, at my own helplessness. Elena was good, Theodora. Truly good. She didn't deserve to bleed out while I held her and begged her to stay. And Callista didn't deserve to lose her mother before she was old enough to form full memories of her. No, Theodora agreed softly. None of you deserved that. But it happened anyway. And now you have a choice. Let that fury consume you, or let it fuel you to build something better from the ashes. Wise words for someone so young. Grief ages you faster than years ever could. They fell silent again, but it was a companionable silence now, the quiet of two people who'd recognized something familiar in each other's scars. Outside, night birds sang, and somewhere in the palace, a clock chimed midnight. Callista stirred, murmuring something unintelligible, and both adults froze. But she just snuggled deeper into her father's arms and settled back into sleep. She's holding my shirt, Alexandros whispered, wonder in his voice. Look, her little fist is clenched in the fabric like she's afraid I'll disappear. She probably is afraid of that. I've been such a coward, hiding from my own daughter because looking at her hurt too much. You were surviving. There's no shame in that. Yes, there is. There's shame in putting my pain above her need. There's shame in letting her face her nightmares alone while I brooded in my rooms. There's shame in being so consumed by loss that I couldn't see the precious gift I still had. Theodora reached out without thinking, placing her hand over his where it rested on Callista's back. Then make different choices going forward. Shame is only useful if it drives change. Alexandros turned his hand over, catching her fingers with his. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, awakening things she'd thought long dead. His eyes widened fractionally, he felt it too. Theodora, don't. She tried to pull away, but he held firm, gentle but unyielding. Don't make this complicated. I'm here for Callista, not for me. No, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just... He struggled for words, this man who commanded kingdoms. I'm just acknowledging that something exists here. Between us. Whether we want it to or not. It doesn't matter what exists. You're a king. I'm an Omega with nothing to my name but a basket of herbs and a cottage that probably already has a new tenant. This, she gestured between them, is impossible. Elena was the daughter of a merchant, Alexandros said quietly. She had no title, no rank, no political connections. My council fought me for months when I announced my intention to make her my queen. I didn't care then and I don't care now. If I've learned anything from her death, it's that life is too short to waste on should and shouldn't, on appropriate and inappropriate. You're talking about attraction, proximity, the intensity of this moment. In a week, you'll realize I'm just another Omega, nothing special, certainly nothing worth. You challenged me in a public marketplace, scaled my walls without hesitation, saw through my defenses like they were paper, and made my daughter feel safe for the first time in 3 years. You're many things, Theodora, but ordinary isn't one of them. Heat flooded her cheeks. You don't know me. Then let me. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers racing across her skin. Stay. Not just for Callista, though gods know she needs you. Stay so I can know you. So we can figure out what this is between us. What if it's nothing? What if it's just... I don't know, proximity and grief and the intensity of the situation making us think we feel something that isn't real. Then we'll figure that out together. But Theodora. His voice dropped lower, intimate. I don't think it's nothing. I think you're terrified it might be something, and that's why you're arguing. She was. God's help her, she was absolutely terrified. 'Cause he was right, she felt it, that pull, that recognition, that sense of puzzle pieces clicking together in ways that should be impossible. And she'd lost everyone she'd ever loved. Everyone. The thought of opening herself to that kind of pain again made her want to run screaming into the night. But Callista chose that moment to sigh in her sleep, a sound of such pure contentment that Theodora's heart clenched. This child had asked for a mother and somehow, impossibly, chosen her. And Alexandros had asked her to stay. Had offered her not just a position but something that looked dangerously like hope. I'm scared, she admitted finally, the words barely audible. I know. I am too. What if I fail? What if I can't help her, can't be what she needs? What if? What if you succeed? What if you're exactly what she needs, what we both need? What if this terrifying thing between us becomes something beautiful? You're an optimist. I'm a realist who's learned that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when you stop fighting it. Theodora looked at him, really looked at him. This alpha king who'd stopped in his tracks for a little girl's question, who'd trusted a stranger with his daughter's well-being, who was brave enough to admit his own fear and failure. She saw the grief that lined his face, the love that shone through despite everything, the desperate hope he was trying so hard to hide. And she made a choice that terrified her more than any she'd made before. 3 months, she said. Give me 3 months. I'll stay with Callista, help her however I can, and we'll see what happens. But no promises, Alexandros. No guarantees. Just 3 months of trying. His smile transformed his face, made him look years younger. 3 months. I can work with that. This is insane. Probably. Your court will hate me. Definitely. Callista will test me in ways I can't even imagine. Absolutely. Despite everything, Theodora felt a laugh bubble up. Why do you sound so happy about all of this? Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel something other than grief. Because my daughter is sleeping peacefully in my arms. Because an Omega who should have run screaming from me is instead holding my hand and agreeing to stay. He squeezed her fingers gently. Because maybe, just maybe, the gods decided we'd suffered enough and sent you to us. I'm not a gift from the gods. I'm just a healer who sells herbs in the marketplace. You're the woman who my daughter asked to be her mother. You're the woman who made me feel again. He caught himself, seeming to realize he was saying too much too soon. You're here. And right now that's everything. They stayed like that until dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, 2 broken people and 1 sleeping child, building something new from the fragments of grief. And when Callista woke to find them both still there, keeping their promise, her shriek of joy echoed through the entire palace. The next 3 months were the hardest and most beautiful of Theodora's life. Callista tested her constantly, pushing boundaries, throwing tantrums, destroying things just to see if Theodora would leave like all the others. But Theodora stayed. She stayed through the screaming fits, through the deliberate defiance, through the moments when Callista looked at her with such fear and hope mixed together that it was hard to breathe. She stayed through the palace intrigue too, the whispered comments from nobles, the thinly veiled hostility from courtiers who saw her as an upstart Omega trying to claim power above her station. She stayed through the meetings where Alexandros's council openly questioned his judgment, through the social events where other Omegas wouldn't meet her eyes, afraid association with her would taint them by proxy. But she also stayed through the good moments. Through the first night Callista slept all the way through without waking. Through the morning Callista called her Mama, without the question mark at the end. Through the evening Alexandros joined them for dinner not because protocol demanded it, but because he wanted to, because he'd started craving their company as much as they craved his. She stayed as something grew between her and the Alpha King, something slow and careful, built on conversations that stretched late into the night, on shared looks across crowded rooms, on touches that lingered just a breath too long to be casual. He courted her carefully, bringing her flowers from the palace gardens, books from his personal library, stolen moments of peace in a life that otherwise moved at a relentless pace. And God's help her, she fell. She fell despite her fear, despite her certainty that she would lose him, despite every wall she'd built. She fell watching him with Callista, seeing how patient he'd become, how gentle, how he'd learned to put aside his own pain to meet his daughter's needs. She fell listening to him talk about his dreams for their kingdom, about laws he wanted to change, about a future where strength didn't mean dominance and power didn't mean cruelty. She fell, and it was terrifying and wonderful and inevitable. The 3-month mark came on a spring evening, with blossoms perfuming the air and the first stars appearing in a deepening sky. Theodora had put Callista to bed, a process that now took minutes instead of hours, and was standing on her balcony, watching the kingdom spread out below her in a carpet of lights. "Penny for your thoughts." Alexandros's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against her doorframe, handsome and disheveled in a way that made her heart skip. "They're worth more than a penny. Name your price." "Truth." She met his eyes steadily. 3 months are up tomorrow. And you need to tell me what happens next, because I cannot keep living in this limbo, not knowing if I'm building a home or just visiting. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "What do you want to happen next?" "That's not fair. You're the king. You're the one who—" "I'm a man asking a woman what she wants. Forget the crown, forget protocol, forget everything except this. What do you want, Theodora?" Her breath caught. "I want to stay. I want to keep being Callista's mother in every way that matters. I want to keep having dinner with you and debating philosophy and laughing at your terrible jokes. I want—" her voice dropped to a whisper. "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm something precious you're afraid to touch." "I am afraid," he admitted. "I'm terrified that if I reach for you, if I claim what every instinct in me is screaming to claim, you'll shatter. Or worse, you'll realize what you're giving up by binding yourself to me, to this life, and you'll regret it. And what if I reach for you first?" His eyes flared gold, his wolf rising to the surface. "Theodora." She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. But then his arms came around her, crushing her against him, and the kiss transformed into something desperate and claiming and absolutely right. He tasted like wine and promises, like safety and danger mixed together in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you. I've loved you since you looked at me in that marketplace and saw me instead of my crown. I've loved you watching you with my daughter, seeing how you've healed her, healed us both. I love you, and I want you to be my queen, my mate, my everything. But only if that's what you want too." Tears streamed down Theodora's face. "I love you too. And it's terrifying because everyone I've loved has left me, and I keep waiting for you to disappear, for this to be a dream, for 3 years I was certain I'd never feel anything again," Alexandros interrupted. "Elena's death broke something in me I thought could never be repaired. And then a little girl asked you to be her mother, and you said yes, and everything changed. You changed me. You made me remember that love isn't just loss. It's also joy and connection and choosing every day to be brave enough to keep your heart open. I'm so scared." "I know. Am I?" "But Theodora." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "I would rather have 1 day of being terrified with you than a lifetime of safety without you. Will you marry me? Will you be Callista's mother officially, legally, in every way? Will you be my queen?" She should have hesitated. Should have thought about the enormity of what he was asking, about the responsibility and danger and complications. But all she could think about was Callista's smile, Alexandros's laugh, the feeling of home she'd found in this impossible place. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." His kiss this time was pure celebration, pure joy, pure rightness. They clung to each other on that balcony as night deepened around them, Two broken people who'd found their way to wholeness through a child's desperate plea and the courage to answer honestly. Behind them, unnoticed, a small figure watched from the doorway, golden eyes bright with happiness. "I told you she smelled right," Callista whispered to herself, grinning. "I told everyone." The wedding was planned for the summer solstice, giving the kingdom time to prepare for the unprecedented event. Their Alpha King marrying an Omega with no title, no rank, no political connections. The council argued, the nobles protested. The old families sent carefully worded letters about tradition and propriety and bloodlines. Alexandros ignored them all. "Let them complain," he said during one particularly contentious council meeting, his hand finding Theodora's under the table. "Elena taught me that true strength isn't dominating others. It's having the courage to choose your own path despite opposition. Theodora will be my queen, and if any of you find that unacceptable, there's the door." No one left. But the whispers grew louder, the opposition more organized. Someone started a rumor that Theodora had used Omega manipulation tactics to ensnare the king. Another claimed she was only after power, that she'd abandoned Callista once she had what she wanted. A third, most vicious rumor suggested she'd somehow caused the late queen's death through dark magic, positioning herself to swoop in years later. The words hurt, but Theodora had weathered worse. She focused on Callista, on building their relationship, on learning the intricacies of palace life. Alexandros had assigned her tutors. Not to change her, he insisted, but to give her the tools she'd need to navigate royal life without losing herself. She learned protocol and politics, history and diplomacy. She learned which nobles could be trusted and which smiled to your face while plotting your downfall. She learned that being queen meant being a target, that every word would be dissected, every action scrutinized, every choice questioned. But she also learned that she was stronger than she'd believed. That the years of surviving alone had given her a resilience these soft nobles couldn't match. That her outsider perspective let her see solutions they missed, connections they overlooked, possibilities they'd never considered. And slowly, grudgingly, some of them began to respect her. It started with the servants. They saw how she treated them, not as invisible hands to serve her needs, but as people with names and families and dreams. They saw how she'd sit with the kitchen staff, learning recipes and sharing stories. How she'd thank the laundry maids personally, remembering their children's names. How she'd stop to help a struggling footman even though it wasn't queenly behavior. Word spread. The common people, who'd been uncertain about this unknown Omega, began to see her as one of them who'd risen up. They brought her gifts, handmade blankets, carved toys for Callista, flowers from their gardens. They cheered when she rode through the streets, and defended her fiercely when nobles spoke against her in their hearing. The turning point came 2 weeks before the wedding. A sickness swept through the lower city, hitting the poorest districts hardest. The palace physicians offered their services, but the people were dying faster than they could treat them. The council advised quarantine, sealing off the affected areas to protect the rest of the kingdom. Theodora refused. "These are your people," she told Alexandros during an emergency meeting. "Our people. We don't abandon them because helping is inconvenient or dangerous." "You're not a physician," one council member argued. "What could you possibly do?" "I'm a healer. I spent years studying herbs and remedies with the woman who raised me." And more importantly, she stood, meeting each council member's eyes. "I'm someone who won't sit in luxury while people suffer." "The king cannot risk his future queen," another started. "The king's future queen is going," Theodora interrupted. "With or without permission. The only question is whether I go with support and resources, or alone." Alexandros looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "We go together. Anyone who wishes to help, come. Anyone who wishes to hide behind walls and protocols, stay." They went together, the Alpha King and his Omega bride-to-be, with Alexandros's personal guard and every physician who could be spared. They set up treatment stations in the worst affected areas, working until their hands bled and their bodies screamed for rest. Theodora used every remedy she knew, every technique she'd learned. She held dying children while their parents wept. She sat with the elderly who had no one else. She worked side by side with women who'd whispered about her just days before, showing them that healing required no title, no rank, only willing hands and an open heart. Alexandros saw her differently after that. Everyone did. This wasn't an Omega playing at being queen. This was a queen who happened to be an Omega, and the distinction mattered. She didn't demand respect through dominance or status. She earned it through action, through compassion, through being exactly where she was needed when she was needed most. The sickness broke after 10 days. The death toll was heartbreaking but would have been catastrophic without their intervention. And when Theodora and Alexandros finally returned to the palace, exhausted and filthy and heartsick, they found the gates lined with people. Thousands of them, holding candles, singing old songs of gratitude and blessing. The council met the next day. And for the first time, not a single member objected to Theodora becoming queen. "You've proven yourself beyond any doubt," the eldest council member said, bowing deeply. "We would be honored to call you our queen, Lady Theodora." She wanted to correct him. She wasn't a lady, didn't have any title. But Alexandros squeezed her hand, and she understood. They were giving her what they should have given from the start: respect. Let them use whatever words made that easier. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, perfect in the way that made people whisper about divine blessing. Theodora woke in her quarters. She and Alexandros had maintained separate rooms, honoring tradition despite the urgency of their attraction, to find Callista already bouncing on her bed. "You're getting married. You're going to be my real mama." The little girl's joy was infectious, impossible to resist. "I've been your real mama for months, sweetheart. This just makes it official. Will you have babies?" "I want a sister. Brothers are okay too, I guess, but I really want a sister." Heat flooded Theodora's cheeks. They'd talked about children, she and Alexandros, in whispered conversations late at night. He wanted more, wanted to fill the palace with life and laughter. And she, gods, she wanted it too, wanted to see him hold a baby that was part her, part him, pure possibility. "Maybe someday," she said, pulling Callista into a hug. "But for now, you're more than enough." The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Servants dressed her in a gown that must have cost a fortune, ivory silk that flowed like water, embroidered with gold thread in patterns that caught the light. They arranged her hair in an elaborate style that would have taken her hours to achieve alone, weaving in flowers that perfumed the air. When they finally stepped back, murmuring approval, Theodora barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like a queen, like someone important, someone worthy of a crown. "You look beautiful," a voice said from the doorway. Alexandros stood there, devastating in formal attire, his eyes burning gold as they raked over her. "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," Theodora protested weakly. "I'm the king. I'll see my bride whenever I damn well please." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "Are you nervous? Terrified? Good. Me too. You've done this before." Pain flickered across his face, but he didn't shy from it. "I have. And I loved Elena with everything I had. But Theodora." His voice dropped low, intimate. "What I feel for you is different. Not less, not more, just different. She was my first love, my youth, my introduction to what it meant to have a mate. You're my second chance, my healing, my proof that hearts can break and still find ways to love again." Tears threatened to ruin the careful work the servants had done on her face. "I wish she was here. I wish she could see Callista now, see you now, see what we're building. I think she does see it. And I think she approves. She always said." His voice caught. "She always said she wanted me to find happiness again if anything happened to her. I laughed it off, couldn't imagine a world without her. But she knew. Somehow she knew. And she wanted this for us." They stood together in that quiet moment, honoring the woman whose death had broken them both, whose daughter had brought them together, whose love still echoed through the palace in ways both painful and beautiful. Then Callista burst back in, destroying the moment with perfect childhood timing. It's time. Everyone's waiting. Come on. The ceremony was held in the palace gardens, under an arbor woven with flowers and ancient symbols of blessing. Thousands had gathered, nobles in their finest, common people pressed at the edges, children perched on parents' shoulders for a better view. Theodora walked alone down the aisle, no father to give her away, no family to stand at her side. Just her making this choice, claiming this future through her own courage. But she wasn't truly alone. Every face she passed smiled at her, offering encouragement, support, acceptance she'd never dared dream of having. And at the end of the aisle, Alexandros waited with Callista at his side, both of them looking at her like she was the answer to prayers they'd stopped believing would be answered. The priestess performed the ceremony in the old way, invoking gods and elements, binding not just two people but two souls, two lives, two futures. When it came time for vows, Alexandros went first. I vow to honor you, to see you as you are and love you for it. I vow to be your partner, not your master. I vow to trust your strength even when you doubt it. I vow to build a kingdom with you where love matters more than bloodlines, where compassion is valued above dominance, where our daughter grows up knowing that true power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. His voice broke. I vow to love you until my last breath and beyond, in this life and whatever comes next. Theodora could barely see him through her tears. I vow to stand beside you, not behind you. I vow to challenge you when you're wrong and celebrate you when you're right. I vow to be Callista's mother in every way that matters, to love her fiercely and unconditionally. I vow to be brave even when I'm terrified, to keep my heart open even though it's been broken before. She squeezed his hands. I vow to love you exactly as you are, broken and healing, strong and vulnerable, king and man. All of you. Always. The priestess smiled and spoke the final words, the ones that would bind them legally, magically, eternally. By the power vested in me by gods and kingdom, I declare you mated, married, bound. You may seal your union. Alexandros pulled her into a kiss that spoke of promises and passion, of grief transformed into joy, of endings that were really beginnings. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Theodora barely heard them over the pounding of her own heart. When they finally broke apart, Callista launched herself at them both, wrapping her arms around their legs. You're married. You're really married. I have a mama and a daddy and we're a family. We're a family, Theodora agreed, scooping the little girl up. Forever and always. The celebration lasted 3 days. Feasting and dancing, music and laughter, a kingdom rejoicing in their king's happiness after years of mourning. Theodora danced until her feet ached, talked until her voice grew hoarse, smiled until her cheeks hurt. But the best moment came on the third night, when the last guests had finally departed and she and Alexandros returned to their rooms. Their shared rooms now, no more separation, no more holding back. He carried her over the threshold like she weighed nothing, kicking the door shut behind them. Finally. I've been waiting months to have you completely to myself. Months of torture, I'm sure, she teased. You have no idea. He set her down gently, hands framing her face. Every night I lay alone in my rooms, knowing you were just down the hall, wanting you so badly I couldn't breathe. Do you know what that's like? Wanting someone so completely that every moment not touching them feels like punishment. She did know. Gods, she knew. Then stop talking and touch me. He did. He touched her with reverence and hunger, mapping every curve, every hollow, every place that made her gasp. They came together like storms colliding, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place, like homecoming after years of wandering lost. Afterward they lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied and so happy it almost hurt. I love you, Alexandros murmured against her hair. My queen. My Theodora. I love you too, she whispered back. My king. My alpha. My Alexandros. They drifted off to sleep holding each other, two people who'd found their way through grief and fear to something beautiful. In the room next door, Callista smiled in her sleep, secure in the knowledge that her family was complete, that the darkness couldn't take them because they held on to each other too tightly to be pulled apart. 5 years passed. The kingdom flourished under their joint rule. Alexandros with his strength and strategy, Theodora with her compassion and innovation. They created new laws protecting omegas, built schools in every district, established healers' guilds that trained people regardless of their rank or bloodline. Callista grew into a bright, confident child, secure in her parents' love, showing early signs of the remarkable leader she'd become. She had 2 younger siblings now, a brother named Leonidas who'd inherited his father's gold eyes and serious demeanor, and a baby sister called Helena after Alexandros's first mate, a gesture that honored the past while celebrating the present. Sometimes, late at night, Theodora would stand on her balcony and remember that day in the marketplace when a little girl had asked her to be her mother. She'd remember the terror and hope, the impossibility of it all, the sheer audacity of saying yes to something that should have destroyed her but instead remade her into someone stronger, someone braver, someone capable of holding an entire kingdom's worth of love in her healed heart. "What are you thinking about?" Alexandros would ask, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How one question changed everything," she'd answer. "How one moment of courage led to all of this. Do you regret it?" "Never. Not for a single second." And she meant it. Yes, there were hard days. Days when the council fought her, when nobles schemed, when the weight of the crown felt too heavy. Days when grief ambushed her, when fear whispered that this was too good to last, when she woke terrified that she'd open her eyes and find it all had been a dream. But there were more good days. Days filled with laughter and love, with watching her children grow, with working beside her mate to build something better than what came before. Days when she looked around and realized she'd created exactly what she'd been denied as a child. A family, a home, a place where she belonged so completely that even the darkness couldn't find purchase. "Will you tell us the story again?" Callista asked one evening, now 10 years old and sprawled across her parents' bed with her siblings. "About how you and Daddy met." Theodora smiled, pulling her daughter close. "Once upon a time, a little girl asked an omega to be her mother in a crowded marketplace." She told the story she'd told 100 times before, watching Alexandros's eyes soften, watching Callista beam with pride at having been the architect of their happiness, watching Leonidas and Helena listen with rapt attention even though they'd heard it countless times. "And then what happened?" little Helena asked, even though she knew the answer. "Then we lived happily ever after," Theodora said, but Alexandros interrupted. "No," he corrected gently. "Then we lived. Not happily ever after, because life isn't a fairy tale. There were hard times mixed with good, challenges alongside triumphs. But we lived together, loved together, built something worth having together. And that's better than any fairy tale ending because it's real." "That's the best kind of story," Callista declared. "The real kind." "Yes," Theodora agreed, meeting Alexandros's eyes over their children's heads, seeing in them the same wonder she felt every day. "Yes, it absolutely is." They sat together in the growing dark, a family forged from loss and fear and one brave question answered honestly. Outside, the kingdom slept secure in the knowledge that their rulers loved them, loved each other, loved the life they'd built from ashes and answered prayers. And in a marketplace somewhere in the capital, another omega walked home carrying a basket of herbs, unaware that her life was about to change, that a child's question was about to remake her world, that courage and compassion were about to transform everything she thought she knew about herself. Because that's how the best stories begin. Not with grand gestures or dramatic announcements, but with small moments of connection, with the bravery to say yes when it would be easier to say no, with a faith that even broken people can build beautiful things if they're willing to try. "Will you be my mom?" a little girl had asked. And Theodora had answered yes. And everything changed. And it was terrifying and wonderful and exactly right. And they lived, not happily ever after in some sanitized fairy tale way, but truly messily beautifully lived. Through joy and sorrow, through triumph and defeat, through all the complicated gorgeous reality of choosing love even when fear screamed to run. They lived. And that was the greatest gift of all. So tell me, beautiful soul watching this, where are you watching from? What city, what country, what corner of this vast world? Drop a comment and let me know so I can send you a virtual hug, because if this story touched you even a fraction as much as it touched me to tell it, you deserve that connection, that moment of being seen. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because tomorrow I'm dropping part 2. Yes, there's more. And you won't believe what happens when Theodora faces her greatest challenge yet, when someone from her past returns, when she has to choose between the family she's built and secrets she's kept hidden even from herself. This story isn't over. It's only just beginning. Until tomorrow, remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is answer honestly when life asks you a question. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single word. Yes. I'll see you in the next one. Stay beautiful, stay brave, and never stop believing that broken things can be made whole again.